And welcome to this episode of the SchoolVibe podcast. I am your host, Daryl Loy. I am the founder of the Modern Learning Collaborative. We are an organization who is here to assist educational leaders in bringing more modern and relevant learning environments and modern learning tools, techniques to your institutions. We would love to partner with your institution and help you begin to evaluate your existing classes and courses and determine how you might incorporate some more modern learning tools, techniques, and environments into your curriculum. So, got a great couple of things to talk about today. The From Around the Web discussion today is trying to figure out what that was in the background there. It is something that I found from another podcast and cannot wait to share that with you. So anyway, happy Wednesday. Was a little late today. I try to shoot for 4:00 on Wednesdays. Sometimes that works, sometimes that does not. And had a little some technical things that I was trying to work out today. I still can't figure out exactly why OBS doesn't like the slide order that I suggest when you'll see it here in a second when I share slides. So I'm running a little bit about my configuration here. I don't know if it matters to anybody, but I thought I'd share. I recently shared on Twitter some pictures of my setup here. So if you want to jump on over there to Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, I am at Daryl Loy, DARRYLLOY. And you'll see some pictures that I shared recently in response to my friend Chris Nessie, who does the House of Ed Tech podcast. He is currently, the episodes he's doing currently are the chapters from a book that he wrote about podcasting. So in one of the previous episodes about one of the chapters, he was talking specifically about gear and about environments, rooms, and that kind of thing. And so I shared some pictures of this environment, my little studio space here. And then also I shared the studio space that I built at the Hills Church, which is one of the podcasts that I produce outside of my own stuff. So I built a podcast studio up there for Jill Shelby. She is the Next Gen lead minister on staff there at the Hills, and she hosts that podcast. I have been on a couple of episodes. Occasionally, she throws the mic to me, and I will speak off and on during some of the other episodes. But I've been featured on actually, it was a two-parter about technology, the use of technology, and the angst, I would say, that some parents feel around that. And I did my very best to attempt to put off some of that angst and help parents understand how and why technology is not evil. It can be used by the evil one, but it is inherently not evil, and certainly not something to be feared, because it is something that isn't going away. In that episode, I'll go ahead and share this. In that episode of the Next Gen Now podcast, which you can find on Spotify or any of the places where you find good podcasts. There's a two-parter on technology, and one of the other pastors who was on the episode with us put questions out to the parents at his campus. The Hills has 4 campuses currently, and he is the youth pastor, children's pastor, youth pastor, student pastor, I think is the official terminology, at the Hills Keller campus. And before we went on air, he put out a message to his parent community of just his one particular campus, and asked if there were questions that parents would like us to address on that particular episode. Well, he was inundated with questions, as you might imagine, if you are a parent with a teenager or someone who is dealing with the use of technology, computers, phones, social media, that kind of thing. So you can imagine that there were lots of questions. So what I'm considering doing, and please hold me to this, because if somebody doesn't hold me to it, I might not get around to actually doing it. But I want to start sort of a sister podcast to the SchoolVibe podcast. I was thinking about calling it the Parent Portal, where I would take those questions, because there were many. I have a document full of those questions that he shared with me that we were unable to address on the episode. But I thought I'd do a Parent Portal podcast where I'm taking each of those questions, one question per episode, and addressing them and helping parents understand how they might navigate that. So a little bit about that. As I said, please hold me to that. It will help keep me motivated. I appreciate that. All right. Well, let's jump in. If you're just listening on the audio version, you won't know that I am a bit more casual today. baseball cap and a t-shirt. I got to step back and see if you can see this t-shirt because it's kind of funny. Hang on. So I know if you're watching, or I'm sorry, if you're just listening on audio only, that won't mean anything to you. So you'll have to go and I'll put a link to the actual video, the YouTube link in the show notes. But it's a funny T-shirt that I'm wearing today, and it's sort of a thing with me, and also with my youngest son, who I've mentioned on the episode, on the show in the past. He is a programmer developer type, so I always enjoy picking out T-shirts and things like that are humorous and computer related. And it takes sometimes computer related folks to get the humor, and that might be the case with the T-shirt that I'm wearing today. Don't know. Anyway, thought I'd share that. So let's jump on in. I have an article and then a topic that I would like to discuss. And then, as I said, I've got something that I found in another podcast that I listened to a couple of, I guess it was just last week. One of my favorite podcasts, the Edufuturist podcast. Listened to a great episode the other day, and the resource I'm going to share with you today from around the web is from that episode. So let's jump in. I want to share the first article with you. I'm going to bring up the slide. There it is. I'm going to go to that article over here if I can find it, and there it is. I found this article interesting, and really I'm in totally the wrong place there from a video perspective. There we go. The thing that I found most interesting about this article, when the title of the article popped up, is this. Let me share the title. It is Why Online Schools Can Offer a More Personalized Learning Experience. This is dated today. Is that right? What is today? Yeah, it is. It is dated today. So part of the reason that this jumped out at me is that my oldest son, who I may have talked about some on the podcast in the past, I don't recall. He finished middle school. Let me see if I can do the math. Along about 2000. Let's see. He graduated high school 2012. I believe that's correct. Let me do the math. That'd be about right. 2012. And so the unique thing about him and his high school experience is exactly this. So that means he started his high school experience, 9th grade, 4 years prior to that. So what's that? 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12. In 2007, in his 8th grade year at Fort Worth Academy, where I was associate head of school for operations, he experimented with his, I believe it was American history class, and took that class online. His 8th grade American history class was taken online. And that was really at the suggestion of our head of school at the time. Because I feel certain I've mentioned that he is severely dyslexic. So the technology improved his educational experience dramatically. So in light of that, his I think it was a recommendation of several of his teachers, as well as the head of school, said, "Hey, why don't we try this?" I had been talking with Bill about the idea of doing a high school at Fort Worth Academy. Fort Worth Academy is a K-8 school, no high school, And we had been discussing the possibility of adding a high school, and I approached Bill with the idea that we could do high school completely and totally virtually. So we were having these conversations. That combined with the dyslexia and the conversations with some of my son's high school teachers, I believe, is what led Bill to recommend trying the eighth grade class online, which he did and did well. And so we began to look around for online high school options. Now, remember, 2008. So this was way on back there. We at Fort Worth Academy had only been in our one-to-one program a couple of years at that point, and we were pretty much cutting edge in this part of Fort Worth. Obviously, there were other schools in the country who were further ahead of us. I've mentioned Lausanne Collegiate School in the past, and the training that I got there, and a lot of our teachers got there on how to effectively implement a one-to-one computer program. So there were schools like Lausanne around the country who were well ahead of us, but in our area, in the Metroplex, in the DFW area, in Fort Worth, particularly Fort Worth Academy was definitely a pioneer in that space. So it was not common at all to consider a high school, an online high school opportunity. We did all of the traditional visits of high school that all eighth grade families go through at Fort Worth Academy when they're looking for a high school opportunity for their student, for their child. We visited all the area high schools and talked with them. Again, a couple of years into the one-to-one program. So one of the questions Dalton would always ask the folks, usually it was the high school or the upper school head and those kinds of folks, admission directors, those kind of folks who ran the meetings that we would have with them when trying to determine if this would be a good fit for our son. So one of the questions he would always like to ask is about his computer. And can he bring that and use that in his coursework at whatever school we were visiting at the time? And often the responses that came back from those educational leaders in those high schools were curious, to say it nicely. Literally, we had one upper school division head respond, and I won't say who or what school because they've all come around at this point, but when asked, can he bring his computer to school to use it in the course of his schoolwork, this particular division, high school division head, upper school division head, had two responses to that. One, he said, well, we teach the classics here. Now, we sort of scratched our heads and looked at each other, not terribly sure what that meant, to be honest with you. Yeah, we teach the classics here. So does that mean you can't use a computer to study the classics? Does that mean that, I don't know. We didn't really know what that meant. So we pressed on a little bit. Sorry, I just dropped my headphones there. We pressed on a little bit, asking a little further questions. Mentioned that we come from Fort Worth Academy, where there is a one-to-one program. The computer has become very, very helpful. His second response was, well, the computer's just a tool. To which I said, yes, you're exactly right. But here's the deal. It's the most powerful tool for education that has ever been built. And that was my response back to that individual who didn't know how to respond back to me, given that response. So needless to say, we did not attend that school for high school. And in fact, ultimately, we did not attend any, he did not attend any of the area high schools. Instead, we uh, found out that a lot of universities, even at the time, I think some still today, a lot of universities were running online high schools. And we found one at the University of Miami. University of Miami's online high school, I believe, is what the program was called. And I actually met with, yeah, after he started enrolled, I met with the high school division head, the individual running the high school out there, and we talked at length about the possibility of a partnership between University of Miami's online high school and Fort Worth Academy. Ultimately, we never ironed that out, but my son had a very successful time there, and they were learning things, and we were learning things, and one of the things that my son was able to help the teachers there sort of learn and understand is one of the points from this article, um, talking about why they can offer a more personalized learning opportunity. And um, in this article, they talk about a customized learning pace. And that was the big deal for my son. What he did every semester was to rather than attempt to do the work as if he was in a traditional school where he spent, an hour on math and an hour on English and an hour on the other subjects that he was studying. What he preferred to do is exactly what they were talking about here in the customized learning pace. He would start a class, let's say English, and do the whole class, start to finish. And that would be his first few weeks of the semester. And he'd get English out of the way, done. Now he's moving on to math. I think he actually probably knocked out the ones he was most interested in because they went fast. Well, now that I think about it, maybe he saved those for later to savor them a bit more. I don't recall, but he did do exactly that. And some of the teachers didn't understand that. So if he, let's say, for example, if he did English first, started his English course and finished his English course, he's a couple of weeks into the semester, maybe 3 weeks. Well, his math teacher is going to look at that and say, hey, this dude's not doing any of his work. When in reality, he's worked every day. And he has, in fact, completed his English course for that semester. So that was one of the things we were able to help them sort of understand about the program that they were offering, that this is an advantage for him. This is just fits him and his learning pace better. So that was a unique, eye-opening sort of experience for them. And let me back up a minute, and uh, clearly the dyslexia was a huge part of our desire for him to do an online high school, but it wasn't the only thing. He, at the time, was a competitive shooter, had earned his NRA Distinguished Expert Marksman in actually 7th grade, and was training. We were taking him to clinics. We were doing clinics and all kinds of training for a potential run at the Olympics. So we did do some traveling, and it was just a more advantageous route for him that would allow him to continue to pursue his interest in competitive shooting and not have to be in a classroom in a fixed location 8 to 3, 5 days a week. He could do his work again at his customized learning pace and still be able to participate in the kinds of interests and hobbies that he had at the time. And what we discovered when talking to the leadership at the University of Miami's online high school is entire class was made up of folks in similar situations. there was a young lady who was a professional dancer. She was a ballerina, I believe, and traveled the world doing that kind of experience. And so this worked well for her. She didn't have to be in a particular class at a particular time, just like my son. One of the others was, I believe, an aspiring actor. And there weren't many. We went to graduation, which was a whole nother experience. We went to the graduation, and he had pretty much discovered by his senior year that there were maybe 8 or 10 other kids enrolled in this program, which obviously helped. Uh, Anyone in the independent school world knows that small class sizes are sort of key to the product offering and the ability. And one of the things that attracts a lot of families to an independent school is that opportunity for small class sizes where their kids can get some more individual attention. Um, but so he found that out pretty quickly. Just a real quick story. We flew to Miami. They did hold a graduation ceremony. We flew to Miami and participated in that. And they did also sort of a team building time. So even before they went through the graduation, they brought all the kids together and they took them out on a boat into the ocean and they did a shark tagging expedition. So they did do things to bring the classes together, to bring the kids together and give them some unique learning opportunities in person as well. So fascinating experience. But so we now fast forward, what is it, 12 years after the fact, and we're still having conversations about online high schools and how advantageous that they can be. So this article talks about some of the big points, certainly a diverse curriculum options. So that was another thing. He had a variety of options that he wouldn't necessarily have having a more traditional high school. You go to a traditional high school, the offerings that those teachers in that fixed location offer, that's what you get. In an online environment, the organizational aspect of the high school can actually reach out to a number of different teachers who bring a number of different opportunities to the table. And we did that at Fort Worth Academy as well. Post my son's graduation, we began to offer unique classes, Mandarin, Chinese, and some of those things that we would reach out and connect with the instructors who would be teaching those, even though they weren't physically there at Fort Worth Academy. We were able to work out the details so that our kids could enroll in their courses, and that would in fact show up on their transcript when they graduated and left Fort Worth Academy. So diverse curriculum options, fantastic. Customized learning pace, we've already talked about that. Individual learning styles, that is critical as well. Every student, we've talked about this on the podcast before, there are in fact all kinds of minds, and not every student, just because they're 15 years old, 16 years old, 17 years old, they're not the same. There are all kinds of minds in the world. And so individual learning styles will just cater to those unique minds and students and be able to help them approach their learning in a much more advantageous fashion. One-on-one instruction, obviously, if you've got smaller class sizes and it's online and the teacher can have more unique office hours, if you will, there was always, as I recall in his experience with University of Miami Online, there were always office hours where any of the kids could come and uh, schedule time with the instructor. And obviously, they did that all online. Back in the day, there was no Zoom. It wasn't that. There was no Google Meet. It was Skype primarily, as I recall. Skype was a huge leader out there in the sort of online virtual connecting space. And I recall that's one of the primary tools that they used. So so they were office hours, and that meant, as this points out, a nice quality of one-to-one instructional time with his teachers. Flexible scheduling, that gets back to the idea that he wanted to start his English course, finish his English course before he moved on to his history course. Um, Global learning communities, and that's huge in today's world. I want to throw out something else along this line about global learning communities. Our youngest son attended High Point University in High Point, North Carolina, and they did a lot of work to prepare those kids for, as I like to say in the work I do, the realities of and success in the modern world. And one of the most unique aspects, well, there were a lot of unique aspects about High Point University, but one of them was uh, they knew that their students would go on to very successful, often multinational corporations, and need to understand the customs of other countries. And in business, business folks always find themselves in the situation that they're at a restaurant in a foreign country with local individuals, and High Point realized that our students, for them to be successful in this space, they need to understand a little about the cultures and what is expected in those kinds of environments. So High Point has a restaurant. 1926 Prime, if I recall correctly, is the name of the restaurant. 1926 is when High Point was founded, and they have themes throughout the week. There's Chinese, there's Thai, and I'm not talking about food types. I am talking about food types, but I'm also talking about the 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 experience of dining in those countries. Germany, they would have these themes throughout the year where students could come to the university, and it was part of their meal plan. It didn't cost the students any more to go to this super nice restaurant, have a wonderful meal, but all of the waiters, everyone that waited on the tables, were actually considered instructors. It was their job to help educate the students about the culture that they were participating in that particular evening. If this was a German night evening meal, then the wait staff would know all of the customs and cultures around dining in Germany, and they would help the students understand that. They had some very, very strict rules based upon those environments. So it was just a huge experiential aspect to what High Point offered. And that's, again, as the article talks about global learning communities, that's another wonderful aspect. You can be in a class with someone from a completely different part of the world. It could be someone down the street from you. It could be someone across town from you. It could be someone in another state. It could also be someone in another country completely. So that's another huge, huge benefit of the online high school offering that makes it a very personalized learning experience. And finally, they wrap up by talking about modern technology integration, which is something obviously we talk about quite a bit here on the podcast. But it's exactly that. The students, in order to participate in this high school offering, they've obviously got the opportunity to integrate the latest and greatest technology into their learning environment. And who among us is not a fan of that? So, great article. Highly encourage it. It's not from an educational source, as you'll see. It came from Travel Daily News, Daily Travel and Tourism News, partially for the international travel trade and market. So they've just caught my eye this afternoon as I was preparing for the podcast. So I wanted to share that, and the fact that I've got just a bit of personal experience with that. So check that out. Got the link there. I'll have all of that in the show notes. And so this is the part where we're going to get a little funky because my slides are out of order, but I want to jump to not that. This is a podcast that I listen to almost daily. I highly recommend it, by the way. It is a podcast by the name of The Newsworthy. It is an interesting 10-minute, roughly, podcast that is available every morning and just talks about the news of the day, the top news of the day. Again, 10 minutes. It's run by, the host is a young lady by the name of Erica Mandy. She's very energetic, and so it's easy to listen to. She gets into a remarkable amount of detail given the roughly 10-minute format of the podcast. But anyway, I try most every morning to go for a walk here in the neighborhood. I try to get up early before the sun is out, get my walk in before I start the day. And I'm always listening to something. Typically, I start the day with the Newsworthy and just see what the latest news is. I highly recommend the podcast. But here's the deal. So I'm listening last week. This episode was Halloween, October 31st, in fact. And so I was walking. It was dark. I start early, even before the time changed. It was really dark. So I start early and get out there, but I've got some Trek Air headphones that I use to walk with. There, I don't know if you've ever seen them. I'll link them in the show notes. I'll put a link to them to Amazon. It's an affiliate link. Sure, why not? But they are bone induction headphones, so my ear is not clogged up like someone who has their Apple earbuds in their ear. My ears are open. I can hear everything around me, and I can listen to the podcast while I'm walking. So I'm not going to get run over by a car. I'm not going to get snuck up on by a neighborhood dog who's trying to, to chase me down. I'm going to be able to hear those things because my ears open. But so I'm out there walking, and I usually start the day with the Newsworthy with Erica. October 31st, a lot of interesting articles, a lot of interesting news tidbits that she shared. But it got down to, and I've highlighted it here on the screen. You may not be able to see it very well. Let me move to a large slide for those of you who are watching online. That might help you. And there's the link there. The link will be in the show note. But this particular part, I guess, news topic that she shared late in the episode is about it's called 4+ hours of daily screen time linked to anxiety, depression in teens. And she lists a couple of the news sources there. And that's not what surprised me. That's not what got me going. Because she, in fact, to her credit and likely to the credit of these news sources, said that while these teens um, may report these issues of anxiety and depression. There is no actual linkage suggesting that the time on screens caused this. And that's my big challenge with the book that came out over the summer that so many people were going nuts about. There's really it's not causal. There's no causal relationship there at all. Don't care what the author says. There's nothing there to indicate that these things are actually causing the kinds of concerns that people have. And to her credit, she mentioned that. But here's the deal. She mentioned something at the end of this segment that I had no earthly idea about. And I don't know how this happened. All of my EDU friends who are out there listening to this podcast, how in the world did you let me down by not making me aware of this? I'll get to that in just a second. So my work is really always has been a little bit about thought leadership, and it is thought leadership primarily as a result of working as a technology guy, as a tech guy, because if you're in the just the rapidly changing world that is technology, if your thoughts are not leading thoughts, then you can very quickly wake up one day and be way behind. You cannot rest in the tech world and expect to stay current. So, as a result of having a focus in my career on technology, I have always felt that for me to be effective, I have to have that quality of thought leadership. Now, what I realized later, years later, is that also a lot of my thoughts around the education technology space and now the modern learning aspect is also a lot of my thought leadership is countercultural as well. And so being a thought leader is hard. Being a countercultural thought leader is just, as I like to say, next level hard. It's just nuts. And so every once in a while, and let me give you an example. Here's an example of something I would consider me being in a position of thought leadership, and also me being in a position of countercultural thought leadership with respect to education technology. For years, I have said, and those of you who've worked with me will back me up on this. For years, I have said that in response to the dreaded screen time conversation, which is what this article or this news segment was about. But my response to that is, hey, hang on a second. Not all screen time is created equal. And what I mean by that is 2 hours of watching cat videos on YouTube is below the line of productivity that 2 hours of, let's say, Khan Academy would bring a student. And you can't compare those two. You cannot compare those two classifications of screen time. And therefore, you cannot simply say a blanket rule, 2 hours of screen time a day is the maximum you can ever have. That's it. That's what the American Association of Pediatrics recommended. A blanket 2 hours. They don't care who you are. They don't care what you're doing with those screens. 2 hours, that's it. No more, no less. And I said, hey, just wait a minute here. You can't expect students who use their devices for their schoolwork. You cannot place that 2 hour limit because they're in class for 4 or 5 hours a day using that device. So what does that mean when they leave school? They're already over that 2 hours. How does that work? You have to look at what is happening on that screen. Not all screen time is created equal. And so there's documentation out there. I was teaching a course at Lausanne Collegiate School. I was leading a session for educators out there. This was summer of 2013. And I know that because an individual who was in this particular talk that I was giving tweeted something that I said. And it was basically that not all screen time is created equal. And that was July of 2013. So I've been saying this out loud for a number of years, documented as far back as 13. Likely I was saying that when we launched our first one-to-one program at Fort Worth Academy in 2007. I'm pretty sure I was saying that back then. And that was countercultural. In fact, I think it's probably still countercultural today. There's a lot of folks, parents in particular, who would argue with me that that is still very much countercultural. It doesn't matter what's on that screen. You got 2 hours, that's it. So imagine my surprise when I'm listening to this really good news podcast, but has nothing to do with education or technology. Imagine my amazement when she shared at the end of this segment that the American Association of Pediatrics had changed their position on screen time. They changed their position, and their position now sounds a whole lot like not all screen time is created equal. So I was shocked. And again, to my EDU folks, people that know me, people that have worked with me, how have you not shared this with me? This was April that the American Association of Pediatrics changed their position on screen time. You people have all let me down. How is this possible that I did not know that this was a thing? Oh my goodness. So here is the article. Not an article. This is from their website. It's called, whoops, that's the wrong one. That's not it either. Hold on. I am getting to my article. Bear with me. It is, let me go here. Let me go here. I'm sorry. I should have been more prepared today. My apologies. But I've got it on screen there. You can see it and you can navigate to that with me just as well. So it's from their website, healthychildren.org. It's powered by pediatricians. It is a part of the American Academy. I'm sorry, Academy, not Association. American Academy of Pediatrics. My apologies. And so kids and screen time, how to use the 5 C's of media guidance. Now, it's kind of funny that they took our 5 C's of education, but I captured this part of the screen because right here at the very bottom on the screen, it's at the top of the article, beyond the 2-hour rule for screen time. I'm going to read this. This is what their position now says. It says, we might wish for a simple solution or set of rules to follow, like the 2-hour screen time limit recommendation in years past. It's gone. It's gone. but those but these don't address all of the things children and teens need to have. Um, these don't address all of the things children and teens need to have healthy relationships with media and to maintain emotional well being. Thank you to the American Academy of Pediatrics. I am not suggesting that they heard me. I, I'm not I'm not that goofy. I'm not even suggesting that they even know my name. To be quite honest with you, I'm just not that. I'm far more grounded than that. These guys don't have a clue who I am. But wow, how validating is it to have such a respected authority, but also someone whose 2 hour screen time limit, that's the rule sort of ethos that I have been literally beaten over the head with for years by parents who were wanting to talk to me about the technology program at the school I was at. How can we expect kids to be on screens for all this time? The AAP says 2 hours. So I have almost physically, literally been beaten up with that for years. And so how how liberating is it, and how validating, as I said, is it that this esteemed organization has actually adopted um, a more appropriate, in my opinion, um, view on screen time. So, countercultural thought leadership from documented 10 years ago, 11 years ago to today. And that is less countercultural. Now, thank you, AAP. So, um, just had to share that. I could not believe that I gleaned this earth-shattering information from an ed tech perspective from the Newsworthy podcast. It's a great news podcast, but why? Why have there not been any conversations on it from any of the sources that I normally listen to with respect to education and education technology? Why has this not been a thing? I don't understand it. The 5 C's are really, really good. I highly recommend you look at them. The 5 C's are child, content, calm, crowding out, and communication. And they make some great points in here. And there are additional resources for the 5 C's at the bottom. The 5 C's questions to ask for infants, for toddlers, preschoolers, school age children, young teens, and older teens. And so there's some great resources here, but thank you, AAP, for realizing that screens are important. Screens are a part of the way we function in the real world, and that's not going to change. So our relationship with them needs to be fully developed. And thank you for doing that for us in the ed tech space. Phenomenal. Anyway, so thanks for letting me get that off my chest. Just love that. So let's move on. I want to wrap up. We're approaching an hour, so I want to wrap up. But let me share with you the one thing from the web that I've learned this week, and that is this. So, as you know, I listen to the EduFuturist podcast on a regular basis, and they had this young man on one of their recent episodes. I'm going to try to say his first name, Hywel. Don't know if I've pronounced that correctly, and I apologize sincerely if I butchered it. His last name is Roberts. Mr. Roberts was a classroom teacher. He now bills himself more or less as a traveling teacher. He speaks a lot. He travels and speaks, and he's written a couple of books. He's co-written one book. He's written a couple, and this is his most recent book called Botheredness. He is from the UK. From I'm not even going to attempt to say where he's from because I will mess that up. But he's from the UK, and so this term "bothered" is very much a UK thing. It's not the traditional sort of definition of the word "bothered" that we here in the United States might gravitate toward. This is not me being agitated by something, but rather it is sort of how, let's see, I think they even talk about this. It's a word that Mr. Roberts used to sum up the kind of authentic care and adult positioning that is real and deliberate and gets children and young people on board with learning. So they're bothered about this. They really they're and he in the book loves to and I think he makes an excellent point to talk about the difference between engagement, students being engaged, and that's a word that I've used quite a bit to talk about the sort of the goal, if you will, for even modern learning and a lot of the tech integration stuff that we do. I have used that word in engaged on a number of occasions, but he introduced me to a word that I think is even better because students can be engaged about a lot of things, and that's not necessarily even in the classroom, and it's not necessarily they're engaged about learning. But what he points out is he's after kids who are invested. This is just a wonderful book. I highly recommend it. I just finished it yesterday. Finished the audiobook, and that's what I've been listening to on my morning walks for the last few days, and also to as I drive around, I'll listen to that as well. So, but I cannot recommend this book enough. And he talks about his approach to sort of getting kids to this bothered state. And he uses stories, stance, and pedagogy. And this, I will tell you right now, his work with stories is modern learning to a T. And here's the interesting aspect of it. It is modern learning with zero digital component. I mean, he talks about technology throughout the book. That's not what this is about by any stretch. But it is most certainly modern learning because one of the key aspects of modern learning and the approach that I take and what I'm attempting to bring to the schools that I work with are the implementation of those 5 C's of education. Not the 5 C's from AAP, but the 5 C's of education. You've got curiosity, you've got creativity, you've got communication, collaboration, and critical thinking. So where's my screen? There it is. The 5 C's of education. And his storytelling, engagement, and investment by students meets all 5 of those C's. He can get kids to be curious in his storytelling. He can get kids to be creative in his storytelling. He can get them communicating and collaborating, and he can get them critically thinking by using stories. He's a phenomenal storyteller, and he has this art down of using stories to ignite and get kids invested in learning. It's fascinating. It's a fascinating book. He's also very much a movie buff, and there's tons of movie references. In fact, the one of the last chapters is just a list of the best movies in his opinion through I think 2009, because that's when he stopped teaching full time and went on to speaking and some of the other work that he does. I cannot recommend this book enough from around the web. So please, please, please take a look at that. I think personally it should be on every teacher's summer reading list coming up this summer. I think it was just released. No, I take that back. Look at that. February of 2023. So it has been around a little longer. He was just recently on the EduFutures podcast, and the audiobook is certainly has been recorded more recently. I think he alluded to that fact throughout the audiobook. But fascinating, fascinating botheredness. Can't recommend it enough. And that's it from around the web. So I'm going to wrap up this episode today. I thank you so much for joining me and being here and being a part of the School Vibe community. Again, one more just commercial, if you will, for the Modern Learning Collaborative. I'm scrolling here, get to my website. There we go. The Modern Learning Collaborative, darylloy.com. You can learn all about the kind of work that that I do and why I do it. There is a free masterclass that you can sign up for. It takes about 45 minutes. It's one-on-one with me, or actually I think I have the enrollment to each session limited to about 5 folks. So it could be just you, could be that you're there with others, but I do those twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 4 o'clock. Takes about 45 minutes. It's a masterclass I'm calling Casting a Vision for Modern Learning. And in it, I give you the why. Why is this important? Why is this kind of work important? And make some very compelling arguments, I think. I've done this for boards. I have done this for individual school leaders. And the one of the first board presentations that I did with this content, one of the individuals chased me down after and said, "Man, that was not an update. That was a TED Talk." So that's kind of how I designed this masterclass, Casting a Vision for Modern Learning. It is more or less a TED Talk about the importance of why we do the kinds of things that we need to do, and what those things are. I jump into some things that I believe a lot of people have no real idea about in terms of the foundations of and the culture behind the current educational system, particularly here in the United States, but it goes back. It goes back a lot further, and it was fascinating for me to do that research. But please join me. Sign up for those. You can find that on my website, darylloy.com, and click there on the Modern Learning Collaborative. You can read more about that, the work that I'm doing, and find links to sign up for those master classes. Would love to have that chat with you and that time with you. So we'll shut it down for now. Thank you again for listening. Please do like and share, and if you will, navigate over to YouTube to the School Vibe podcast channel and click the notification buttons there, so that you know every time I am here going live. Typically, as I said, I try to crank it up somewhere around 4. Sometimes it's closer to 4:30, like it was today. But again, like, follow, rate the podcast. Appreciate that. All that stuff helps other listeners find find the podcast, and that would be much appreciated. So until next time, I appreciate you, and we'll talk to you soon.